And there we go. Now we are live. So yay! Welcome everybody. It is our very first, our inaugural employee advocacy blab where we're going to get blabby. We are going to get blabby. And I am delighted to be joined by Aubrey Littleton, who is working on research with the Altimeter Group and Ed Turpening, and she's going to chime in with some excellent insights about Altimeter's recent employee advocacy report, which, you know, we're all big geeky fans of over here. And Jim Nickerson, as opposed to James, if you only know him from Facebook, who's repping for Dynamic Signal, and Julio, not Julio Viscovich, who's for R Factor. So welcome everybody. I'm so excited to be able to do this because I shared with you all and with the LinkedIn and immediate world that last year, right about this time, Robin Carey, God bless her, she set up an employee advocacy shakeup day that preceded the annual social media shakeup. And I got to tell you, and I even said to her, I felt for the first time in so long like I had rediscovered my tribe. You know, we all like to talk about finding your tribe and finding your, you know, and I was like, where's my tribe? Where are my people who are, I didn't even know I was missing my tribe. I mean, truthfully, I didn't realize it until I refound it. And it was because, you know, we've all been talking offline a little bit here this morning about how we've all been working a bit in a vacuum as marketers, as sellers, as, you know, social human beings. You know, we put together these programs on behalf of our clients, our brands, our partners, and we're all experiencing diminished reach, and we're experiencing diminished engagement, and we're experiencing, you know, reduced trust, a reduction in trust, and all those things that we can get into. But cobbling these programs together with our employees as advocates, and interestingly enough, discovering the same solutions, you know, independent of each other. And what I loved about that half-day session was knowing that everybody was sort of in it together, fighting this good fight. We weren't all alone. There was a community of people actively working in what we are now calling employee advocacy and sharing information freely. And there you go. That was a great day. That was a great day. So afterward, Jen Miners, who's with Electronic Arts, had said, you know, hey, we should all continue this conversation in some format. And we landed on a LinkedIn group. That disappeared. And honestly, I'm not even sure it was the best format anyway. But that brings us to today. And I'd been waiting to see if anybody was going to jump in the pool and create something like this where we can all talk on a regular basis and enter all of us today launching. So props and thank you.
Cool.
And I think what I wanted to kind of start with, because as I also said to you all, it's a little bit of an everybody in the pool scenario today, you know, not a really narrowly defined conversation, but how do you all define employee advocacy? Aubrey, would you like to start? How do you personally define it?
Yeah, I mean, it can take on different forms depending on the industry, depending on the business or the organization. But you know, at its core, what we found is it starts a lot with engaging employees and informing employees with content, making them better informed about what the organization is trying to achieve, understanding what your colleagues are going through, what accomplishments they're achieving, and then being able to share that and be really proud of that and inform your greater network. And I think that from a marketing perspective, it's almost secondary. There's this sort of halo effect that comes with it, and just enabling your employees to kind of amplify those messages in a formal way. I think that's the best way that I can describe it.
And what I like about that, for sure is the fact that you mentioned that it's not just about amplifying a message or getting a message out there. It's about empowering your employees. It's about providing them an opportunity to grow, both professionally, personally, and sharing content that's not just beneficial for the brand, but mutually beneficial for them too. And that's the way that we can get people excited about it.
Yeah, I think as I work with members of the press and people like Aubrey, the shorthand form I use is employee advocacy is the way to get the right information into the hands of the right people in an engaging and shareable way. When I tell this story again to these distinct audiences, people sort of get the brand advocacy part. They sort of understand that you can turn your employees into brand advocates. But more and more, we're seeing the employee advocacy tool used as an internal communications function. That's a really interesting sort of tack that we were not expecting here at Dynamic Signal, that we're following up with clients and people who are asking to share information within the organization, maybe without the share button.
Mm-hmm. And you know what I think is also interesting about that is when you're sharing internally, well, here, let's just back it up for 1 second. Who then ideally owns employee advocacy? Owns employee advocacy programs. I mean, I think that's another thing. Also, hearkening back to a year ago at that session, it's fascinating to see who owns it within an organization, because I think it also speaks to what the goals and priorities are for that organization, right? So if you are, and R Factor, I think, can speak to this, pretty well. If it's going to live in your sales organization, then you're pretty much a sales-driven organization. If it lives in internal comms, then you have a very different set of goals. So wondering what you all think about that. Like, where do you find it living most comfortably?
Again, I think it's unique to every situation, Karen. I think that's a good point. Marketing oftentimes raises it, puts their hand up, says, "Hey, let's talk about this because something's happening here in our space. Things aren't working so well anymore. How do we then empower people?" There's stats, and I know Altimeter's put out tons of this as well around peers are being trusted a lot more than brand marketing these days, right? So how do we empower that? And then I find that there's always seems to be a shift with HR as well, because to roll this out at scale, you need their buy-in. You need them to back you up. And I think if you're going to make it so the employees really feel that there's a what's in it for them, HR is the folks that can actually drive that and put it into a professional development program or help with that. So.
And that's the WIFM, the what's in it for me of. And connecting that dot back to employee advocacy, that is, and I get a lot of questions from people about, well, why do we call it that? Why do you call it employee advocacy? And it's that WIFM that you're talking about right there. Do you agree?
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. That's exactly it. And I think that has to be at the heart of your communication strategy as well when you're launching this, right? And I'm sure Jim can pipe in on this as well too, through his experience. But people buy in when there's the WIFM, right? If there's no WIFM, they just feel that they're just another channel, another person, another number. But when they can feel that, then that's when they get excited, and that's when you start to see things spread like wildfire.
Yeah, and Julia makes a great point about how you may come in, and we normally see people coming in sort of the social media comms area, but no matter how you come into the organization, legal, IT, HR, they all have to be involved at some point. And the interesting thing that happens is, and we've experienced this, we work with a lot of sort of large enterprises. What's interesting is my sales team and customer success teams will tell me that we may come in at the CMO or comms level, but all of a sudden at follow-up meetings, they're seeing the HR department come in and they're like, "Oh, I can find a use for this." And then they're seeing their internal comms people come in. So it's great because employee advocacy as a term and as a word can fit into many of the functions. The challenge for us on this side is like, how do we message that? Like, that's something I work on every day is, how do I message what's behind employee advocacy when so many people in the C-suite can find a use for this tool?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a question from Randy. Hi, Randy, waving at you. And his question is, who has the money to pay for this? One group, or do you get support from each group that's using it? Excellent question. Do you spread that wealth around, or who's gonna come up with the cash? I can tell you that in my experience, it's been marketing.
Yeah. And I think I'll just speak for a minute on that. Like, we know that people will start with small pilots, right? As you know, it's just a business axiom. It's a smart way to start. And I think the other point on, I totally lost my train of thought.
Who pays for it?
Yeah. Sorry, Julie, I'll let you pick up, and if I think of it, I'll.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, exactly, right? I think it does start in that pilot, Jim. I mean, exactly. Everybody wants proof of concept. This is a new thing. It's something new. Let's prove it out first.
Right.
And once it proves itself, then we find that there's other cost centers that come involved. And again, I think Aubrey will be able to really hit home on this one, but I've always looked at the center of excellence that Altimeter puts out and bringing a team together of, you know, folks from each and every department that are diverse, that are going to help drive this. And then I think, you know, it can pull in from there, but generally marketing as well, I think, Jim.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would agree to an extent. There needs to be involvement from more than just one department. And what we saw in a lot of our interviews was that companies who brought it in through marketing, they tended to have a very narrowly defined scope for employee advocacy instead of looking at it through the greater lens of culture or through the greater lens of employee engagement. They were really focused on how many impressions are we getting, more, you know, vanity metrics and things like that, which are important, but they're only a part of it, right? And so getting as much involvement as possible from HR, from IT, from communications, I think it is really helpful. And really, the brands that we spoke to who were the most successful tended to have a more communications-leaning program, a program that was more centered in communications. I think partially because you need the employees in order for it to be successful, right? And so it makes a lot of sense for someone who their main role is to be interacting and disseminating information to the employee base to get involved in helping roll out a program that is sort of the whole purpose.
Right. So the whole cultural, piece of this, it's interesting, just a small real world anecdote here. Did work with an organization who had for a long time always taken the position of, we don't want our employees being social.
Right.
I mean, that's not unusual. That's been the law of the land for a really long time. And if there were permissions granted, they were very narrow.
Right.
And so, and coupled with that is, in this scenario, a CEO who understands the value of social, but is not himself social.
Right.
Really doesn't want to be a part of it. So you have at the very top layer, you've got somebody saying, go ahead, it's fine, but sort of not fine. Like there's a mixed message there, right? But now we're going to have this employee advocacy program, and now it's okay. It's really hard to undo that culture that you worked so hard to establish, in saying, these people have permissions granted, these people do not. Oh, well, no, now you sort of do. It's a really, really mixed message. So undoing that web, wow, that's hard. Aubrey, you're nodding up there, and you're all nodding. Chime in.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to talk about that a little bit. I mean, I think one of the larger trend stories around employee advocacy is the demographic story, right? So we're at a really interesting point in time. We're at sort of a tipping point where people who control budgets and are looking to install these programs might not be what we call mobile first and digital native. But 60 to 70% of the global workforce is under the age of 35. They have always had email. They have always had social media. So as time moves on, these people who might be in junior manager positions, they're going to start to become managers and VPs. And so the smart, forward-thinking organization is going to start to learn to communicate with their employees the way they talk to each other. And I I just think that's a larger trend story that has yet to sort of be reported.
Which I know you were touching on earlier, and we kind of veered off that path. I want everybody else to chime in on that thought, so don't lose your place. But you were talking about video for internal comms.
Right. I think that something it's part of our product we have as our app is. I mean, you can send within our app a short 30-second video of the CEO to everybody around the company on our platform. But I think the important thing is that it makes sense, right? You think about how employees are communicating with each other, right? They're sending each other short, video snaps on videos on Snapchat. Right. They're sending each other short message tests. They're sending each other JPEGs. So if your employees are communicating in a certain way, the smart enterprise, the smart small business is going to mirror that. And that's both from an internal communications perspective and giving them the content to be advocates.
Right. Julio, did you have something you were going to throw in there?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to backtrack a wee bit to Jim's point about, now it's a new culture. It has to be a new cultural shift right now happening, right? And I think if you think, what can you use to communicate, right? We had email, we have phone, and we have social media. And it's literally a tripod. You have to offer your employees the opportunity to communicate in the best way that they want to communicate in, and as well as your potential customers want to be communicated with. And if you're going to avoid that piece altogether and stick to phone and email, you're going to quickly go the way of the dinosaur.
That's so funny because at JSarah Marketing, just I feel old now.
Join the club.
To build on that, on the point, Jim and Julio, in our research, one thing that we uncovered is that 80% of the advocates that we surveyed said they're using social tools at work to collaborate and share internally. Mm-hmm. But only 17% of them said that their employer was providing some means of facilitating that. So whether it's an enterprise social network or something like that, it's a huge missed opportunity, in our view, for an employer, for an organization to engage in a strategic way with their employees and to facilitate and measure to some extent what and how employees are sharing.
Yeah.
And so we thought that was really interesting. I mean, people are doing it anyway.
Right.
And they're finding ways to kind of hack together the functionality that they need, or to communicate in the ways that they're accustomed to communicating with, and outside of work. And so it doesn't really matter whether IT sanctions something or HR is okay with something. Mm-hmm. Employees are going to do it anyway.
Right. We always have.
We did some survey with Mindshare, and maybe one of my colleagues will post the link. There's a JPEG that talks about something like 57% of employees already think they're advocates, but only like 20% of them feel they're getting the proper information from their employer. I just want to harken back just to a quick anecdote about what Julio said. We think that most people are communicating, like, of course you get a corporate email, right? Like, of course everybody has corporate email. And our CEO, Russ, it's always great to sit in meetings with him because he's just a great spokesperson. And but he tells the story about how he visits these large global enterprises. And there's a global manufacturer that has 170,000 employees. 100,000 of them don't have corporate emails. What? It's this, and he rattled.
Wait. What?
We as practitioners, we sort of live in that 1%. We live in that bubble, But there's a lot of people on the shop floors of car factories in Mexico and working in the local franchises that don't have the same communication pipes that we all access. Yeah. And every time I watch Russ tell that story to investors or to partners about, these people, hundreds and thousands of people that don't have corporate email, everybody across the board always just sort of, they're like, wow, I'm still.
Yeah, you touched on something important too. It's the franchisees. It's direct sales with their volunteer sales force. I know, Julio, you and I have talked about that a bit. You have part-time employees. You're talking about people right on the floor, and I know that there are platforms that address each of those verticals. When I mean, part-time, and then you've got, the direct sales. There are platforms that address them specifically. to get them communicating. But the general theme is still, you've got all these people who don't have email or who are not connecting in the way you think they're connecting.
Right.
So we have a question here from Jane Sarah. It's a good question, Jane. Which should be launched first, employee advocacy programs or client advocacy, and why? Ooh, the plot thickened just then.
I'll jump in and
Bill
throw a few thoughts. It really depends on your business, right? I mean, as a B2C business where you're focused on consumers and they're looking online, they're looking to social, they're looking for, people to tell them how their experience was, right? Hotels, things like that. I mean, that's a B2C play straight up. So that's something where you definitely want to focus on external advocates, clients, right? And then there's businesses where, it's great to start internally, right? Get that going. See how that goes and, get the message out there, and it's going to have maybe a greater impact than it would be activating clients.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna pass on this to a piece of content we've already created. And again, I have a great team supporting me here. I think someone in the leaks will be able to find our CMO, Pavi, talking at AdvoCamp a couple of weeks ago. And the topic was employee advocacy or customer advocacy.
I saw that.
And the answer was both. So that entire video is on our resources page, and I will let Pavi answer that question better than I could probably.
And look, they've already put it here in the links. It's already there.
I have a great team here. I'm very lucky.
I know, they're a very great team. Aubrey, did you have something to share there?
Not really. I think that Jim and Julie did a good job.
Yeah.
It really is going to depend on your industry also, Very
yeah. I want to be mindful of time because I promised everybody it would only be 30 minutes of your time, and look how quickly these things fly by. Your Twitter gif, Jim, was right. Batman and Robin cruising along. So I'm just going to hover around and see if anybody had some other questions maybe that I missed. No, it looks like we're good. And we've got a ton of links that I would encourage everybody to access and take advantage of. We started up by saying, what do you think employee advocacy is? And I know, again, there's sometimes some confusion with the use of language when we're talking about it with the or under-initiated. And, conversations like this, I think, help to open that up for people. It's not so intimidating. There's actually nothing intimidating about it. I love the quote, actually, in Altimeter's report from Hootsuite, that we all feel is true, that this isn't new. It's not new. It's just, again, that convergence, that perfect storm that we talked about earlier, that it's here. The time is really now to embrace this for all the reasons we talked about. But anyway, I thank you all for being here. Do you have any parting thoughts? What should we tackle next time?
So much to tackle, right? So much to tackle. I think my parting thought would be, a lot of people, and Aubrey said this eloquently earlier regarding, you think about what metrics to use, and it's about getting the word out there, the reach, engagement, etc. But it's not just that, right? Those are vanity metrics. Marketers love those.
Right.
But what's going to really get you promoted is what happens after the click. What do people really do afterwards? Is that really going to make a difference? Are they going and signing up? Are they going through the buyer's journey? Are they heading over to a landing page and giving you guys some data? I think thinking of what happens after the click is key. And I always say, get real with your metrics. Don't just stop at reach, engagement, amplification, but look at leads generated as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd like to say two things. First of all, I think for those of us that are really close to this issue, it's hard to sort of see the broader issue. And I applaud Altimeter and some of the other analyst firms. I believe, and I'm writing a blog on this later this week, I believe that Q1 of this past year has really seen this spike in many analysts covering the space, which are helping us as practitioners to define it and talk about it. So Aubrey, thanks Charlene and Ed and everybody over there. And I think to close out from our part, I think there's two major things I like to think about. Reaching a new audience is harder than ever.
Yeah.
And internal comms is kind of broken. And I believe that employee advocacy really can, done well, address those two issues and show, back to Julio's point, show the metrics and analytics behind that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I was a little premature in saying wrap, but here's one more question from Randy. And I'm not sure, Randy, if you were thinking maybe this could be a future discussion, so maybe we'll just tackle it a little bit now and go for it later in broader form. But where are employee advocacy platforms going to be in 5 years? Everything being shared in VR versus mobile? Question?
If you look, our April Fool's prank this year was employee advocacy in virtual reality. and props to my team, props to the team here, Stephanie and Debbie, who put together a great infographic. And it's half joking. Like, we tell the story, more and more content's being produced, and there's more ways to consume it.
Right.
Virtual employee advocacy, virtual reality.
Don't know.
Might happen.
No.
Sounds great. I chuckled.
So maybe we'll tackle that next time. Everybody, thank you. Really, thank you so much. I really look forward to doing this more often. If you're following along here in the live chat, or you catch this later, be sure to reach out with a suggested topic or a question that you have that you want, the group at large to talk about around employee advocacy. I think this is going to be wildly valuable for people to really just participate without feeling like they're being sold. No offense to anybody, but I mean, because we're all in it. We're all doing this from the heart. It's for me, it's become a passion point in my marketing toolkit, and I believe for all of you as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us, Karen.
High fives.
Thanks, Karen.
Fist bumps.
We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much,
everyone.
everyone.
Everybody.
Bye.